Welcome back, Thrivers, to the final episode of May 2024 on the Thriving Equine Professional. We have had three tremendous guests on the show this month, and we have an awesome lineup for the summer. I'm so excited. So don't go anywhere. Make sure that you are tuning in and catching up on previous episodes. We celebrated the 1 year anniversary of this little podcast of mine. And so I just have to say thank you for all of the great feedback and the suggestions, and each of you that has been a guest. And I hope that every one of you that are our thriving listeners are gaining greater clarity and greater confidence and greater connections in each and every episode of the Thriving Equine Professional. So, as I said, we've got some exciting updates coming. One that I want to make sure I share right away is that we are now on YouTube. So I'm excited about that. And of course, as much as I've learned this past year, I do need a little help along the way. And so while there are some things that I have certainly learned, there are others that other people do so much better than I do. So a huge shout out to Krista Paffraths, who I am working with now as part of the Rural Podcast Network. So I'll encourage you to follow the Rural Podcast Network and connect with Krista. But that is where some of these updates are coming from. So I just feel so blessed and lucky to be a part of this mastermind of young individuals who are really kind of creating content out here that is meant for you, and especially meant for those of us in rural communities, in agriculture, careers, animal health, etc. So again, thanks to Krista for all the help, and go check out the Jodi Speaks Life YouTube channel. So those are a few of the updates, but I want to continue answering questions that I get all the time and from listeners or from audiences with my speaking and training. And one of the soapboxes, you all have heard a few of my soapboxes along the way, but one of the soapboxes that I continue to kind of combat and address recently is the terms busy and productive. So we live in this space, and I've been on this soapbox for years because I'm going to ask each and every one of you to answer this question honestly. First and foremost, when someone asks you how you are, how many of you respond by saying something along the lines of, "I'm so busy"? Like, you'll get a look from me if you respond that way. I am super judgmental about that response. I'm just going to be honest with you because I chose a long time ago to really surround myself with very specific and intentional people. So, you know how important I believe connections are. And I believe that we are in a culture that is celebrating busyness, and it's unnecessary, and it's really detrimental to our health and our productivity. Because if we're striving for anything in particular, friends, we need to be striving to be more productive, not busier necessarily. And so I have a couple of tips and tricks for you to think about today. But what I want to put to rest is the glorification of busy. And I think that, whether we are moms or not moms, whether we're dog moms, whether we're wives or spouses, whatever roles that we have in life, guys, we all have the same number of hours in every day. And I read an article recently that was just talking about this topic, and it was explaining, by like a Harvard professor, what the glorification of busy was doing to us. And someone insisted that, the importance of meditation and spending your time very intentionally taking care of your whole self, not just your work self, and how important that was. And the quote that was shared was that someone said, "Well, I don't have time to meditate." And she said, "You know what? If Oprah has time to meditate, you have time to meditate." And I just thought that was a humorous response, but it drives home the point of how intentional are you about how you are spending your time. So let's talk about being busy versus being productive. And I've got, just a few tips that I want to run through with you. Some of this came up because one of our guests this month on the show mentioned Stephen Covey. And so if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I think it was last week, go back and listen to that episode with Maria. And that's a book that I read years ago, very early in my career. I was a huge follower of Stephen Covey. And I remembered that I learned from my studies and reading of his books what is really known as the Eisenhower matrix. So the opportunity that we have to decipher between urgent and important, urgent or non-urgent, important and non-important, and how we classify the tasks that we have in our day, especially as it relates to our professional endeavors and our careers, and how we are spending our time. And I'll be real honest, I had kind of forgotten that resource, but I went back and pulled it out just to take a look. And one of the quotes that comes from Dwight Eisenhower, where this matrix comes from, is what is important is rarely urgent, and what is urgent is rarely important. Oh, I love a good quote. It speaks to me. And so I really had to kind of take that to heart. That is so true. What is important is rarely urgent, and what is urgent is rarely important. And it brought to my mind a very specific instance. I left a job, left a manager because I felt this constant sense of urgency that was unnecessary. He was actually the poorest manager that I've ever worked for in my life. And if I really reflect on it, it comes down to exactly this: the complete inability to have any social awareness around how he spent his time, what he classified as urgent versus important. And ultimately, that's one thing if you are a solopreneur like me and I'm kind of wasting time along the way. I do that sometimes, but I'm trying to get better. But it's a whole nother thing when you are managing a very high functioning dynamic team. And I think that is probably one of the worst reflections of a manager. And honestly, it was a point in my career that I said, I am done here. I can't work for someone like this. It is not productive. It is not growing me in any way. And this person clearly needs additional training in human behavior and management and effectiveness and productivity and job satisfaction. And, the list could go on. But that's really how important it is to understand whether we're actually busy, or are we being productive and moving forward to achieve the goals that we have and the objectives that we have set forth. And there are a couple ways I think we can really evaluate that. One of the overarching principles of this concept is do a few things and do them really well. So I told you at the beginning of this episode that I'm working with Krista Paffrath now as part of the Rural Podcast Network, and she's doing some of these tasks that Krista's really good at and Jodi's really not good at. And so that's always the goal, is to get to that point in your business where you have some support, where you can bring in some people that can do things. But it also speaks to the importance of delegation, whether that's with your family or with your professional team that you work with. Understanding yourself well enough and really spending some time to know what is important, what is urgent, and how are you balancing the time that you spend on those things. So do a few things and do them really well. Jot that down. Think about what that means to you. And you can even differentiate personal and professional and kind of think about how you're spending your time. Number 2 principle is focus on issues that matter and ignore the rest. This is so difficult. This is really, really difficult. And when we really think about what does matter, the world is screaming at us about what matters constantly. whether you've got the television on or whether you've got a device in your hand or your computer in front of you, your emails are open. You want to talk about something Jodi absolutely despises anymore is email. We are so inefficient with email. And I think that's a great example of focusing on issues that matter. So I'm going to be the first to say when there are 5 emails, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15, and it's the same discussion and we are batting the same things back and forth. We have to be done here, friends. That's busyness. That's not productivity. Pick up the phone, get on a Zoom, walk over to somebody's office, whatever that is, come to a resolution. Present a problem or a challenge, present what the task is that needs to be completed, and take action. Ignore the rest of the noise around us. So, what does that look like in your life? Yes, for me, it was email. I started to really just get very angry about the volume of emails and the inefficiency in corporate America of how many emails are absolutely useless. So, I'll encourage you to start to really kind of take hold of that and get them filtered and color coded and start to let people know I'll handle one email of this and I want to know who is responsible for resolution and how it's going to move forward. If you need me, let me know, but I'm not going to be reading through every single email in this chain as it comes through because I'm not the primary point person on this project. Whatever that looks like, it's hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy, but when you do truly start to take ownership of what matters and what really moves the needle in the responsibilities that you have, you'll find some freedom in making some of those sometimes hard decisions. Identifying the tasks. Number 3, identifying the tasks that will deliver the greatest results with the least effort. This is probably best summarized by working, as you've all heard this quote time and again, let's work smarter, not harder, right? And so I, being a self-proclaimed queen of efficiency, am usually pretty direct about things like that. I see a resolution, I see a way to do things and a way to do them right. Oftentimes, if I am not the primary point person, maybe I need to step back and let someone else make some of those decisions. But when it is involving tasks that are mine, projects that are mine, pieces and parts of my business, then I need to identify what is going to deliver the greatest results and move forward with that and put away some of the other things. This year, I have loved coaching. As I have started to really build Jodi Speaks Life, I have absolutely loved doing career coaching, which has primarily been early career success coaching. And so as I have moved through that, I also had to really let myself see and understand how I was spending my time and what some of the return was on that. I very much want to continue growing my speaking business, and that needs more of my time. And so I need to start to step back from the individual coaching. That's just a small example of identify those tasks that will deliver the greatest results, maybe with the least effort, but again, working smarter, not harder. What's going to move your objectives and your goals forward? Spend your time there. Number 4, attend meetings and events that matter. Ooh, am I speaking to you, corporate America? Any of you that are out there working in corporate jobs, as I did for almost 20 years, I will be the first to say that the meetings just keep coming. The meetings just keep coming. Some of us need to take a little bit of ownership to say, this is a meeting that could have been an email. This is a meeting that could have been a phone call. Okay, how can we make these meetings more effective, more productive? What's the time frame? What's the objective? Everyone needs those notes ahead of the meeting. And if I hear the term, I'm covered up on back-to-back meetings all day long, one more time, I am going to scream. It is not a badge of honor to have 12 meetings in a day. It's just not, because what I will ask you is which ones were worth it? Out of 12 meetings that you attended today, what did you accomplish? And I will challenge you to start asking the same thing. Which meetings do you need to attend? Which meetings can you be more of a leader and lead from where you are? That is such a movement today. It's such an opportunity for so many of us. We are competent and credible, and we are able to provide value. So when we are prepared for a meeting, when we are prepared to sit down with someone, have a phone call, whatever that looks like, then we are ready to accomplish the goals and objectives that we need to accomplish. And so don't be afraid to share that, and then be done. Your meeting lasted 4 minutes. Great, even better. You can go be productive for 26 minutes before your next back-to-back meeting. So again, like, attend meeting and events that matter. Events, that's a whole nother story. I'm huge on, I think we need to get back to in-person networking events, in-person professional meetings and opportunities. And we need to not have all of that time scheduled. The informal time that we have in order to collaborate and connect with colleagues, customers, coworkers, all of the above, that's really important time in order to foster your productivity and fill you a little bit. It doesn't necessarily need to be overwhelming, but we do need to have that time to have conversations with people that allow us to learn and grow and interact in an informal, non-meeting way. So find those events and meetings that are going to be a good spend of your time. Number 5, in summary, I will say own your time. Own your time. It is easier said than done. And I have a great friend, shout out to Savannah, who I love her 3-8 philosophy. The 3/8 of our day is that we have 24 hours. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. And the more and more of us that really start to time block and start to think about how we're spending the hours of our day, we can absolutely learn from Savannah's 3/8. And the 3/8 are that we have 8 hours in the day that should and can be committed to our job, our career. We have 8 hours in the day that should be committed to our sleep, our rest. We have 8 hours then remaining of our 24 that is ours. How are we going to spend that on our family and our health and whatever other endeavors that are important to our heart and soul? And so by owning our time, I do believe that really kind of starting to split up the 3/8 and understand how we're spending that time, that we can take some ownership back of it. Now, I think I mentioned maybe even on an episode not very long ago, and I think it's just still scaring me to think about this data. Some of you may have seen it going around on social media that we will ultimately spend 20 years of our lives scrolling on our phones, scrolling, head down, eyes down, thumbs in motion, scrolling on our phones for 20 years of our life. I question the validity of this, but it does worry me that there is truth. So when I talk about owning our time, I would be remiss not to say that if we really start to track how we're spending so much of our time, I believe that each of us can take the opportunity to put our devices down a little bit more than we are. So it's not a bad thing for us to have downtime. It's not a bad thing for us to have time to relax. And that doesn't mean that it just happens on vacation. It's not a bad thing at all. There's science behind the importance of boredom, and especially for children, that the time that we can spend being a little bit bored is our most creative time. And that's what really contributes to our mental and emotional growth and health. And so I caution us to really consider the amount of our free time that we spend scrolling. So, with all of that said, I again challenge you to consider how you answer the question, how are you today? And if you say, I'm so busy, I want you to start to really evaluate that. And maybe you just stop and take a pause before you answer the question when someone asks it. My favorite response is like, come up with some of your favorite responses. Mine are, if you ask me how I'm doing, many of my dearest friends know this. I'm usually going to say fabulous or fantastic. And the more we say those kinds of things to ourselves, the more truth there is. I'm not trying to be falsely positive, but are we truly busy? Is my question. Are we really that busy? Or are we struggling in a world that is creating chaos, chaos of back to back meetings, chaos of putting out fires, chaos of negativity, chaos of rush deadlines, chaos of false urgency? And our ability to double down on the work that moves us forward is really going to be our opportunity to own our time. And so check your responses. Don't be afraid to say no to some things. Get intentional with your time. I will say that I know that our energy flows where our time and attention goes. And so when we choose our time and attention and we get purposeful with it, we will see and feel some really productive results from that. Without the intentionality, friends, of where and how we spend our time, we are wasting time being busy and not achieving the impactful work that we are here to do. And so, whatever purpose we are here for, it requires our time. It requires what I call our competency and our consistency and our credibility. And I've talked about all those things. In order to be competent, we have to be curious to learn. In order to be consistent, we have to be disciplined and intentional. And in order to be credible, I want you to be fully, wholly, authentically you. And so I challenge you today to think about your definition of busy, your definition of productive, and where you fall on that spectrum today and where you want to be tomorrow or next month or next year. So, with that, friends, that is the topic that I wanted to cover today. I am so happy to be with you again this week as we have celebrated 1 year of the Thriving Equine Professional, and we have so much more to come. So, we will see you back here, same time next week. Cheers.